right, I will call this Downtown Design Review Board meeting to order for Thursday, August 22nd, 2024. Item 1.2, a request from staff that this meeting confirms with the Kansas Open Meeting Act. Required notice has been properly provided.
Yes, I can confirm the packet was posted and the required notice was provided.
Thank you. Item 1.3, roll call.
I will call the roll. Board Member Nilsson. Board Member Romey.
Here.
Board Member Doak.
Present.
Chair Manley.
Present.
We have 3 of our 4 appointed members present. That constitutes a quorum for conducting today's business, so the chair may move on with the remainder of the agenda.
Item 2.1, approval of minutes from last meeting, fairly short meeting. I'll entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
I move to approve the minutes from the July 25th, 2024 regular meeting.
I'll second it. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. On to new business, item 3.1. I noticed these kind of switched around in order from the packet that was originally provided, or maybe I'm just losing my mind, but item 3.1 with Maureen Madison.
So just for the benefit of the board, we generally put the applications on the agenda in the order in which they came in and were received. And so the application CC 24-9 has been postponed a couple of times, and so it is first on the agenda. And so this is an application that has 3 elements to it, but only 2 of which, or only 1 of which, we have any information about what is being proposed. But this is a building that most commonly referred to as the former Warden Clothing Building, because Paul Warden installed the current brick facade that everyone sees today in 1974. And so it has been in this condition with the beige brick and the upper story windows with smaller openings that were there originally, and Warden's Clothing operated here until the mid-90s, and the primary occupant now is Eccentricity Women's Clothing. It's been there about 12 and a half years. We also have Next Tech Wireless and Industry Hair Company in the building. And so the second story of the building, to our knowledge, is vacant and unfinished, and 104 North Santa Fe LLC, which is Roger Madison and Edward A. Vidrickson, acquired ownership of the building in 2014, and they are the current owners. So this application was filed in response to a letter that we sent to the building owner and occupant asking them to cease painting the lower facade of the building, and the painting did cease after the painting was completed on the lower level, but it continued after our request to stop. And so this was originally scheduled for July 11th consideration, then July 25th, and now moved to this date. But we have a case. It's a little bit of a repeat case, but there was an application that came before this board in 2015 to paint the facade of this building a dark brown color. That plan was to paint the entire facade all the way from bottom to top, and there was also a request to replace the awnings in the front. And so though the request to change out the awnings was approved, the request to allow for the existing beige brick to be painted over was denied. And on page 4, we provided the reasons that the board gave for denying that request to paint the facade, and that was that the original brick facade is in good condition. The building is architecturally unique, and the painting of the facade would conceal interesting detail and interrupt the visual continuity along Santa Fe. The painting of an intact masonry building will cause the building to lose its visual character. And one of the things about painting brick is it begins a cycle of repainting and maintenance over time that may be more expensive than just cleaning and repairing that brick. And so the cleaning and preservation of brick is supported by the design guidelines as an alternative to painting. And so the rear facade of this building had already been painted, and so it was repainted in 2015, but that's allowed if it's a previously painted surface. So now we have the current application, and as we noted, you have in your packet a letter that we sent to the building owners asking them to cease their painting of the building until an application could be filed and the proposed facade change could be reviewed by this body. And so we received an application, and it has 3 elements to it. One is painting the lower window level facade black. This would involve hand painting the brick at street level tricorn black by Sherwin-Williams, and we would note the work is already done, and we apologize for that, but we're bringing this to you nonetheless. And so, as we were explained to us, the purpose of painting the facade black was to serve as a backdrop for an Ivy design mural that was to follow the protruding brick on either side of the main entrance, and that mural work was going to be done by muralist Logan Wright. There was also an indication of a desire to replace the double doors at the main street level, and we don't have any information on that, what the replacement would be, what it would look like, the materials, any of those things, so we can't. It's mentioned, but we don't have any supporting material to provide you. And then there was talk about replacement of the black awning in front of the Next Tech tenant space. We don't know, we don't have any illustrations or anything about what it would be replaced with. If you take an awning like what's in front of the Next Tech space and it's old or worn or has too many pigeon droppings, it can simply be replaced with a like awning, the same color, shape, and dimensions, and that would be considered just maintenance and wouldn't come before this board. But we provided you with some information about the guidelines relating to doorways and facades. And so we would just point out then that our guidelines say that unless necessary to protect the surface, masonry should be left unpainted. And then as to colors, the facade should read as a single composition. And then many of our buildings downtown qualify as historic buildings. Some have historical designations, and the Secretary of Interior's guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings saying applying paint or coating to masonry that's been historically unpainted or uncoated to create a new appearance. The guidelines recommend against doing that. So the green awning was approved in 2015. We don't have any record about the installation of the black Next Tech awning. The applicant has not provided any drawings or details about the door replacement project either, and so those would be needed in order for the board to take any action on those. This building is somewhat significant from the standpoint that it comprises 3 separate storefronts, so it has 75 feet of frontage, so it has a pretty large visual impact on the street. And so the owner of the building, Mr. Warden, wanted to emulate a storefront design he had seen in downtown Dallas, Texas. And so he is the one that put the new beige brick facade on in 1974. And so as we've noted, the business owner and the applicant wishes to add a painted mural on the front Santa Fe side of the building, and the mural would have a black paint backdrop covering the beige brick. And so if this were approved this afternoon, it would be the first front facade mural in downtown Salina, except for Salina Art Center's mosaic mural, but that is not nearly as large and does not cover the entire facade. And so I think the one thing that we want to point out as you go around downtown, you will see that public art, such as Art in the Alley or Boom Festival murals, are on the blank sidewalls of buildings, or they're at the rear of buildings facing the alley, because the design guidelines discourage them being on the front. And so that's what makes this request unusual, is if you go up and down Santa Fe, you won't see many painted facades, or at least original brick that has been painted over. And so there have been some limited cases downtown where you have really poor quality masonry material that's been damaged. That's not the case here. And so paints and sealants can sometimes trap moisture and make the masonry walls more susceptible to freeze thaw cycles. They can cause surface spalling of brick and deterioration of the masonry units and mortar. So for those reasons, on historic buildings, they are discouraged. The other thing we pointed out is that the Kansas State Historic Preservation Office has mural guidelines for historic downtowns, and they state that murals are not appropriate on the front or primary facade of a historic building and should never cover a whole building facade. And so we've placed that in there. And so the facade that we're discussing dates from 1974. That makes it roughly 50 years old, and in the state of Kansas, 50 years old, and under the National Park Service historic designation, a building that's 50 years old is considered historic. And so we've had a number of places where specialists have come in and done cleaning and repair of masonry structures, most notably at least twice that I'm aware of on the Stiefel Theater, where there's been cleaning and tuck pointing of the brick, but no painting. And so I think the thing that's notable here is that the brick is in fairly good condition compared to some of the older brick downtown. So we have looked at this from the standpoint of the design guidelines, and as a staff, we're not able to recommend approval of the painting over of the front facade masonry, and we have provided reasons on page 8 and 9 why we feel we can't make that recommendation. But if you as a board disagree with those findings, or if you see the painting of the lower street level only as not an item of concern, then we have provided some alternate findings on at the bottom of page 9 that could support a motion to approve, but that would be based on, I guess those findings are based on the presumption that they're done painting, and we're not going to try to paint the whole rest of the facade. And so in terms of our specific recommendations, we don't have sufficient information to make a recommendation on the awning replacement because we have no information. We don't have any information about the front door replacement, so we can't make a recommendation on that. Since the design guidelines don't support the painting of intact masonry brick facades, we're not able to recommend that. The muralist simply should not have proceeded with painting the front facade without a certificate of compatibility. And if you do approve this proposal, then we would just point out that we would work with you to carefully set out your findings as it relates to this case. So in case you're concerned that it might set a precedent for future cases along Santa Fe as to painting historic brick or painting a mural on a front facade. And so following review of any additional design information, and you wish to approve the exterior painting that's taken place, we've suggested 2 conditions of approval, and that would be that one of them would be that all painting of the masonry should be at street level only, and no portion of the upper facade of this building is approved to be repainted or painted, excuse me. So the other thing I would note is that we have some information about the mural and the ivy, but the Design Review Board does not review proposed private or public art downtown, only signs and exterior painting. And so the question before you today is not about the ivy mural, but whether the masonry surface should be allowed to be painted over and painted black in this case. So with that, we're open to any questions that you have. Mr. Madison, the owner of the building, is here to get the owner's perspective, but we simply as a staff, because it's Santa Fe and because it's kind of a case of first impression, it's not something that we can go in and write a recommendation to approve. It started happening. We tried to stop it. We walked into the store immediately when staff noticed what was happening, and we did not prevent it from being completed. But you have that information in your packets, and so we don't like bringing you after the fact applications, but here we are.
Before I ask the applicant to come up, I'll ask a few questions of staff. So if I heard you correctly, the mural part of this project is not on the table for consideration.
The reason this is before you is because it's an application to apply black paint to the original masonry surface. You can have opinions about the ivy mural. You can look at that and take into account how you evaluate the reasons for painting the base level black. But the question that's before the board this afternoon is, should this lower level be allowed to be painted over the original masonry, and should it be painted in black or some other alternate color, if painted at all?
Any other questions from the board of staff?
But we provided you with the information about the ivy mural because the justification given to us as to why it needed to be painted black was to provide a backdrop for that mural. So.
Okay. All right, I'll invite the applicant up.
My name's Roger Madison. I'm one of the owners in the building. I'm really not sure what I'm here to ask for, other than we prepped. My wife said she was prepping that bottom, and then she was going to, at that time, see what would happen as far as putting a mural on that front. But as a building owner, I feel like it was somewhat helping keep up with the facelift that was going on downtown. If you do look at the picture it shows, it draws your eyes down. It doesn't look up the whole building. So I felt like that was good for the businesses there. Like you said, those Next Tech and Industry of Hair and Eccentricity are three very good businesses that are thriving in Salina. So I guess what we're trying to do is help our tenants any way we can. That's all I guess I have to say. If she would, after this situation, she will decide what she wants to do after, I guess, we find out how this lays. So that's about all I have.
Okay. I do have a couple of questions for you, mainly from staff. The doors, do you have any more documentation on what type of doors, what material?
The doors, I believe the doors were going to stay the same. It was just on each side as you walk in. There's a foyer. This is one of the very few buildings downtown that as you walk in, there is a foyer that directs you to 3 different areas. So it is, like Dean said, it's a very unique building. Mm-hmm. Myself and Mr. Vidrickson, we have 4. We've been involved in 4 or 5 commercial properties in Salina, Lawrence, and Branson, and so we always try to work with the people and that are in there and try to make it work. So my wife has, I felt, built that store into a destination store. So that's she always is trying to improve, invent herself again.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
One more question on the awnings. You said you wanted to replace the black awnings. The green awning was staying the same. The black awnings, we're going to get it replaced.
The black awnings, we're having trouble, like Dean said, with the droppings from the pigeons. We have gone up higher and put up spikes so to keep the pigeons off that top ledge. We're going to see how that works, and then we'll make a decision after that.
Okay.
So just to clarify, Roger, if you put up a black awning, just like that black awning, but new and clean, you don't need any kind of approval. But if you were to change that or make it bigger or make it round instead of square or make it green instead of black, you would need to bring that back here to have that reviewed.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And the original painting on the facade was a discussion between you all as the building owners and as you said, your wife or as it would be the other businesses that are in that space. Is that correct? Just between you all, that was the conversation. There wasn't any conversation to anybody else downtown, Salina, anybody?
My wife felt she was really just prepping the wall.
Okay.
That's kind of a prep paint.
Gotcha.
And so she was prepping it for what she might decide to do. And,
Okay.
you know, in business, you're always trying to keep all your options open. Mm-hmm. So, and me as a business owner, I did, you can see right there, your eyes get drawn down to the street level. And so it brings your eyes down, that soft color it was. Mm-hmm. And I felt like it was a good positive situation. It was done in a weekend, so mm-hmm. didn't block any traffic. There was, she in her thinking, if she had to go up, she'd have to build scaffolding, and that's where we'd have to get into more deeper situation.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay. Thank you.
Any other
anything
questions
else?
for the applicant? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will open it up to comments from interested citizens. Anyone in the room or online?
Yes, my name's Leslie Bishop, Executive Director, Salina Downtown. I certainly understand that the proper procedure wasn't made during this, the project. However, I will agree with Mr. Madison. Eccentricity and Maureen and her staff are a destination shop. They're very popular within the community and outside of the area. Next Tech is also, I understand they're not the owner of the building. However, they are also very good downtown businesses and business supporters. And the new hair salon that's in there are also doing great things for downtown. I would just really ask and encourage the board, the design review board, to extend some grace to see if we can work with eccentricity. As you all know, owning a small business is challenging at best, and we would like to make this process easy for eccentricity so that they aren't out money, but we can support them however we can. Thank you.
I have a question for you, Leslie.
Yes.
Does those comments extend to the entire extent of the 1 and 200 blocks of North Santa Fe and South Santa Fe, or are they for this particular case? Because one of the problems we have as a staff is that the design guidelines discourage this. And are you saying that SDI wants to encourage this up and down Santa Fe, or what is the message you're conveying to staff?
Yeah, I mean, I want to say that the downtown business owners need to follow the procedure that are listed by the City of Salina and the Design Review Board. I certainly agree with that they shouldn't just go, business owners shouldn't just be allowed to change the exterior of their building without getting going through the proper procedure. I'm just asking in this case if we can work with eccentricity somehow.
Thank you, Leslie.
And so that is to that end is why we have drafted alternate findings on the bottom of page 9 to go with staff's own findings. And so the board may want to look those over because they may decide they need to be strengthened or modified or maybe language added because it's not completely unprecedented, but when you're making a decision and that decision is not in accord with the design guidelines, that's just important to why you call out that particular approval as opposed to a future case that might come along. So we have done the best we can. We have the option of going into a closed session to hammer those out. That's not the ideal situation, but this is a case where findings become important, and so our findings in support of denial are based on the design guidelines. The findings in support of approving this are designed to try to highlight the uniqueness of the situation, one, and identify the scope of what is done. As Mr. Madison pointed out, the painting is only at street level on a fairly tall building, and in his view draws your eyes down to street level when looking at the facade. That is a finding that the board could make, but it's something the board should just have in mind, that the findings should be able to distinguish this case from a future case that might be different, and that's the approach staff has to take.
All right, any other public comment? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board for discussion, or I will entertain a motion.
And you'll note in condition 2, even though technically it's 1974, staff would agree that the front on the Warden's building is more modernistic in look than other brick facades on Santa Fe, and so we have called that fact out. But we'd be available to any additional questions. But the vote this afternoon is simply on whether to approve the painting of the lower facade and that the color black is appropriate in this location.
So I guess if my question comes down to, I get the approval and the precedence that we can set on that. The alternative side is if we deny this, what is needed to be done to the current structure then that's already been painted and completed?
Well, if it's denied, we would try to work with the owners and the muralists to try to get the paint that's been done removed.
Okay.
And that's what that you would have to do. I mean, just to be blunt, it shouldn't have been, we shouldn't be here with it already being painted. And we did ask the muralist to stop, and he did not, so.
So is the mural there?
No, the mural is not there. This is, as Mr. Madison noted, this is the backdrop. This is prepping for the mural. And so, as it was explained to us, the idea wasn't simply to paint the facade black. The idea was to paint the facade black to form a backdrop, or as a step one of step two, which was to have the muralist do the ivy mural that we've provided some information about in your packet, just so you have it as information for what was the motivation for the painting. And so, as it was explained to us, the black paint is to create a backdrop.
Do we have a motion from the board?
Would that be a motion, the alternative findings?
So just, we didn't try to confuse, but just for the benefit of the board members, on page 8 is staff suggested findings about the exterior painting, and that those findings at the bottom of page 8 and top of page 9 are findings that would support a decision of denial. The findings at the bottom of page 9 are attempts to create alternate findings that could support approval and do our level best to try to avoid an unfavorable precedent. And then, just for the benefit of anyone trying to make a motion, on page 10 there are 2 suggested conditions, and so that says, following review of any alternate design proposal or additional information presented at the hearing by Mr. Madison, if the board wishes to approve Eccentricity's exterior facade painting proposal, staff would recommend that the following conditions of approval be attached. So if the board wishes to approve, you should reference the findings that are set out on page 9 and any additional findings that the motion maker wishes to make. And then we believe as a staff that if there is action to approve, that you should limit the painting to the street level only.
And then it will be responsibility of the board, and so say, hypothetically, like it is approved, responsibility of the board to make sure that this process doesn't happen again, where somebody can come and say, well, I painted it similar to my awning, so I'm going to come to you guys later on. So just to kind of,
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing
have
you
this
can
not
do
happen
about
again?
the precedent of people doing the work before they come to you. And
Okay.
that's unfortunate, but that's something for staff
Okay.
to worry about.
Okay.
What you're trying to do is leave breadcrumbs. And Mr. Manley was directly involved in the painting of the facade on the yard building on 4th Street. But what we did there was we worked really hard with the board to say, what's the unique circumstances of the yard and 4th Street compared to other locations downtown. And so the board makes those findings. And so one of the things we do, and we did in this report, we gave you what the findings were of the board in 2015 when they said we don't think the whole thing should be painted. And so whatever you do for action today and the findings that you make, those are going to be archived. And if there's another case similar to this, we're going to say that the findings the board made in this case were this. And then future boards can decide whether the cases are the same or different. But our job is to just help you, you decide what decision you want to make, and then our job is to help you articulate the findings that in your mind might make this case unique compared to some other situation. And the fact that it's already done is for staff to worry about, not necessarily for you.
I'll go ahead and take a stab at this. I will preface the yard, as these were fairly close projects. When we made that motion, 4th Street was a big deal of it, and I did mention Santa Fe, or a handful of streets, primary streets, arterial streets would be different. 4th Street was industrial. There was nothing of architectural significance on that building. And also there was an element of a sign, a painted sign on that with the contrast. So while I agree with you, your heart was in the right place. The intent was good. The design, frankly, is good, but I have to stand by guidelines for precedents of the rest of Santa Fe. What does this allow the rest of Santa Fe? Anybody could paint their building any different color, whether it's got architectural significance or not. Anybody can paint a mural, so I don't want to go down that path. So I will make the motion to deny the application, but I will encourage the applicant to talk with the mural process. I'm unfamiliar with that process, but there are murals downtown that, this is a thing. It may not be on a front facade, but that is a thing. So I would encourage you to go down that path to see if that would be an acceptable route. But me seated at this board, I don't have a grounds to proceed with it. So that was my lengthy motion to deny. And also, the doesn't sound like the doors are an issue, as well as the awnings are not an issue. So this is just about painting the black.
I just wanted to point out for Mr. Madison, in the application we received, the attachment to it said that painting the brick street level tricorn black by Sherwin-Williams, hand done, no spray. Ivy designed to follow on the protruding brick. Double doors replaced for newer doors with some wooden black accent, and for better function, doors there are quite old. So maybe this is a shopping list for you and not necessarily for today.
You didn't mention the door.
Yeah. So awnings may be replaced as pigeon damage isn't washing off, but would be replaced with the same design, just the black awning. So again, if we can work with the owner to replace the black awning with a new black awning, and that doesn't require, but we can follow up with them on the doors. But as Mr. Madison is the landlord and Eccentricity is the tenant, now he's aware of the door request, but that could be something that could come back in the future. So we're just focused on, again, the painting of the brick facade at this point.
A motion is on the table.
I second that motion. With the similar situations of the precedents of the concern of even the other two candidates that are here today, if we were to approve this as, although in good intent, there that just opens up the door for a lot of other people to come in with a lot of good intent, and for us to see downtown Salina alter in maybe a positive way, but also could be in an uncontrolled way. So that is my second to the denial motion.
It is moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 3-0.
That motion carries, and we'll work further with Mr. Madison on the door question and on the mural question, the most appropriate place for that. But that's something that's can be for follow-up. So.
All right, moving to item 3.2.
We have item 3.2 that has been filed by Maggie Gillum on behalf of the owners of the building at the northwest corner of Santa Fe and Iron, which is addressed as 101 North Santa Fe. And the request before you is to perform some exploratory demolition on that front facade. And I believe Mr. Hers is going to present this report, and I believe we have the architect and the building owner here. But we'll let Mr. Hers give you an overview first.
Thank you, Dean. The subject property, as Mr. Andrew mentioned, is the northwest corner of Iron and Santa Fe, as you can see in this photograph. And we have new owners who have acquired the building, and the building has a history in which it was originally constructed in the 1880s as a Farmers National Bank, has gone through several different renovations and modifications to the structure over time. The most significant in terms of the exterior change happened in 1957, and which resulted in a stucco exterior being added to the building, and that's what you see today. If you go back through some of the historical information we have on the building, you can see that at one point in time there was a brick facade with what we believe to be some stone wainscoting, and then also windows around the upper level or second story. And so this is a drawing that shows some of the conditions that used to prevail on the building prior to the 1957 exterior modifications that were made. And so this is what we have today, and the new owners would like to explore the condition of the exterior of the brick that was there previously, as well as the windows that have been covered. And so we'll go through some slides just to see some of the data that's been collected to show what has been done to the building. And so you see a metal band, you'll see a canopy awning. Those are being proposed to be removed, as well as some of the stucco for exploratory purposes. So we do have some photographs that the architect and the applicant have put together just to kind of highlight some of the things that are being looked at. Again, this metal band and awning would be removed, as well as some of the stucco. This here is the south facade. Here's another view of the south facade. Here's the south facade, and you can see all of the windows that were shown on the drawing have been covered up. South facade again. This is the east facade, so facing Santa Fe, but the same thing where you have a solid wall versus the windows. Here we have some photographs of the inside, and you can see those windows from the inside, how they've been boarded up and stuccoed over on the exterior. You can see them on the inside. And so those would want to be uncovered and explored to see their condition. Here you have a small opening in which there has been identified as some stone. And then you can see in this opening, you can see the brick as well as the plywood system that was overlaid on top of the exterior to add the stucco that you see today. These photographs show the overlay of the system that was used to apply the stucco to the exterior of the brick and stone. And then these are the drawings that show what was once there at this location. And so what the applicant is wanting to do is renovate the building. If they could, they would like to repurpose the brick if it's in good enough condition, tuck point it, repurpose it, reuse or repurpose any windows that are in good condition or replace them if necessary. But the idea is to try to restore the former storefront facade that was on the building prior to the 1957 modifications. So once the condition of the two masonry facades is known, and that information will be used by the project architect to plan potential improvements, and any restorative work with new plans would come to you as a separate application in the future. So this application is for demolition and exploratory purposes so that they can figure out next steps to refurbish the building and bring it back to its former condition. We do have a couple of findings on page 3 for you to consider in this. And the first is that the character defining features of the structure that are intact will be preserved. And the second is that the features would be preserved using appropriate maintenance techniques. And so staff would recommend option 2, which is to approve the application subject to any conditions approved by a majority of the DRB members. And we do have a couple of conditions on page 4 that you could consider. And the first is that if there will be any significant changes to the demolition activity approved by the DRB, these will be presented to the board's administrative staff to determine whether additional review is required by this board. The second is that any further restoration work or facade modifications, including but not limited to window replacements and exterior awnings and signage, must be presented to and approved by the DRB as part of a separate certificate of compatibility application. So this application is for, again, demolition and exploratory purposes so that the applicant and their design team can come up with a plan of how to restore the building and come back to you with that plan later on. So if you have any questions or if you'd like to see any of the slides, we can revisit those. Thank you.
Dustin, we do have in the packet on the last slide or on the last page of this part of the packet, we do have a photo of the building 20 or 30 years after construction that gives you an idea of the windows. Staff did some research in the Kansas Historic Resource Inventory and found, so that's in your packet.
I'll find it here.
For you to look
up.
All right, any questions of staff before we invite the applicant up?
Here's that photo Mr. Gage alluded to. So there you can see the upper story windows as well as the lower story windows and the different facade features that the building once had.
All right, I'll invite the applicant if they would like to speak.
Hello, Maggie Gillum with Jones Gillum Renz Architects. I feel like this is probably pretty straightforward. We don't exactly know why the facade was added in 1957. We have suspicions that there might be some structural concerns with the brick, just based on what we found on the inside of the building and with some of the structure that's there. So the only way to know is if we remove portions of the facade and find out. We're hoping that it's all going to be in good condition. We've heard from some people locally that they thought it was in good condition, but they also thought that it was put on in the 80s. And so I'm finding out it was actually put on in 57. So yeah, basically we're just asking permission to remove some portions, figure out what's there, what's the condition of what's there, and if we find that it is in good condition, to kind of continue removing and hopefully be able to remove all of the faux facade, revealing the original facade, and then from that point we would move forward with figuring out how we're going to rehab and design for what the client needs.
Is there an option where you don't like what you see aesthetically? Structural is a different story, but you don't like what you see and you put it back?
Yeah, it's a pretty easy facade to repair if we need to upon finding that there are structural concerns. I think we would, in that case, we're going to work closely with the contractor as they remove it to evaluate it as they go along and make sure that we don't get to a point where they're removing a lot of it and there are major structural concerns. More than likely, if that does happen, we'll try to cover it and protect it while we internally decide what's the best fix. Because in this case, the best fix might actually still be removing the facade and then repairing the brick, because leaving it in a condition that's not sustainable is not exactly, it doesn't have longevity either. So, I mean, ideally, it's going to be in perfect shape and we're going to take it off and we're going to rehab it, but we just don't know what's there.
Okay. Any other questions of the applicant?
Okay. I don't know, Jessica, if you have anything to add? Okay.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Maggie. All right, I have comments from interested citizens, whether in person or online.
Hi again, Leslie with Salina Downtown. From an office standpoint, we're so excited about this project. And I will add, and I don't know if this has anything to do with what's on the table today, but during the last windstorm that came through Salina, I do know that some metal pieces did come off of that building that fortunately did not cause any damage to any buildings and did not cause any harm to any bystanders. But so I'm grateful that this building is being looked at, and because there are some things that did happen during that storm that could have, been more serious than they were. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. I'll bring it back to the board. Any additional comments, questions, or I will entertain a motion.
I approve, or I move to approve the application with the conditions from the staff recommendations 1 and 2.
I want to clarify, well, it's a motion, so I guess I can clarify. To the extent of they can remove all of it, correct?
Yeah.
It's exploratory,
Exploratory
for now,
to-
but if they like what they see, they can take
Continue
the whole.
on.
They don't have to stop.
No,
and do anything.
continue,
They like
yeah.
what they see, they
Yep.
can take it all off.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll add
With
that.
that condition of post that if there's any further restoration or facade.
So I will second that motion. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. All right, moving to item 3.3.
Item 3.3 is a certificate of compatibility application that's been filed for 109 North Santa Fe, or what is address there. There, if you look at the streetscape and you look at it, these are two separate buildings that were built at two separate times with two separate designs and functions that have been combined. The south one being 107, the north one being 109, and they're now combined as 109. But the 107 building, the south building, was constructed as a two-story brick building, and it was covered over in 1931 with a masonry facade to try to achieve an Art Deco look, which was popular at that time. Maybe the most notable thing was that the building, the south building, was the home of Shelton's ladies' wear from 1935 until the mid-1980s. And so that's a pretty good longevity. People my age will remember that the building was converted to Shooter's Bar and Grill in 1988 and was there from 1988 to 1999. And then it was combined with the north building in 1999 by the building owner in order to create Capers Cafe and Bakery. And after Capers closed, it became the home of Mocha's Bistro, and then Mocha's Bistro relocated and the Heart of Dixie restaurant opened in that space. And so following the closure of Heart of Dixie, the space sat empty for quite some time, And now the owner has a new tenant that's occupying the space, which is Candili's Restaurant, and they operate restaurants in Augusta and Mulvane, Kansas. And so in June, we observed, again, at the same time as across the street, we observed painting of the front facade, and we sent a notice to the building owner to make sure they're aware that painting or repainting a front facade required the review and approval of Salina Business District Number 1 Design Review Board. And so we also could tell that people were working in the building, and so we were trying to identify who the prospective tenant was so we could contact them to talk about what sort of permits they might need before trying to open a business there. And so the owner was not responsive to the notice that we sent, and we were not able to determine who the prospective tenant was. In the meantime, the tenant made substantial changes to the kitchen and installed a wood privacy fence along the rear alley. And so in late July, staff received an application for a drinking establishment license at this location submitted by Candili's Mexican Restaurant. And it was at that point that we were able to identify who the tenant was that had been doing the work. And so as part of the process for the Kansas Alcohol and Beverage Control, they require that the local zoning administrator certify that the establishment location complies with all local zoning codes. And so the zoning administrator, being myself, informed representatives of Candili's that we were not able to sign their license application until there had been an occupancy inspection of the building, that necessary permits had been applied for the work performed, and that a certificate of compatibility application was received for the exterior changes and the sign that they are wanting to put up as part of their business. And so we did conduct a site inspection. We developed a checklist of items. This application was filed. As a result, city's staff has signed off on the liquor license. The premises is occupied, and we asked Candili's to hold off on putting up any type of sign till this board had an opportunity to remove it. And so the questions before the board is formally we had a red brick building covered in stucco, while the south facade was gray concrete masonry, and both of them have 25 feet of frontage. And so the Candili's has proposed painting the stucco along the lower storefront green, and as observed, that work has already been done. They're also proposing to construct a wood privacy fence with an iron gate to close off an alcove that's at the rear of the building, and then that work has already been done. And the applicant's proposing installation of a new exterior sign on the front facade of the building. And as we understand it, that would be a projecting sign that would project out from the front of the building. We've highlighted the information there about the certificate of compatibility process. We have a pending fence permit for the fence and gate, but we cannot issue that fence permit without a certificate of compatibility, and we cannot issue a sign permit without this board approving the sign. So it's a little bit different here from the standpoint that one building has an original facade, the other one has been covered over with stucco. The north building was historically painted. It was kind of a salmon color previously for a number of years and has been repainted green. But the south building had never been painted, and it has been painted green as well. And then, as we noted in our review of the sign, projecting signs are encouraged, but the internal illumination of an entire sign panel is discouraged. And so we're not sure about this sign, but it appears to be designed so that the whole white sign panel would be illuminated, and so we would work to try to modify that. But the covering of an intact masonry facade, as we noted in our first case, is discouraged. And in this case, we have a 50-foot facade. The masonry on the 1931 masonry facade in the south is in relatively good condition. It involves painting over a previously unpainted masonry, and to me, or to staff, it doesn't seem like it was necessary or particularly well thought out, and so we could see repainting the one portion, but we don't understand the painting of the previously unpainted portion. And we have a couple observations about the wrought iron fence, or the privacy fence with the wrought iron gate. And so one of the things is there's an alcove area back there, and we fully understand that for security reasons, having a barrier there is important. One thing we don't understand is we don't know what the alcove or the internal space is used for. Maybe it's just used for storage, but one thing that's unusual is if it's just used for storage, the way this fence was done, the attractive side was put towards the inside, and the unattractive side, the back side, was facing the public side or the alley. And it would seem that if it's just an alcove that might be used for storage of things, that it's possible the fence could be reversed so that the good side faced outward. And so, again, it appears, we don't have information from a sign contractor, but it appears to us that the sign is designed so that the whole cabinet would be illuminated. And so in the downtown area, illumination of an entire sign panel is discouraged. And so as far as the size of the sign, the design, that all seems to work. The other thing we wanted to point out was that, and we've talked to the tenants about this, and it's ultimately a property owner responsibility, but this property has two awnings on the front, and one of the awnings says Heart of Dixie, and the other one refers to Southern and Cajun cuisine. And the city has an abandoned sign ordinance that requires building owners to remove or cover over signs that advertise businesses that aren't there. And so it seems to us not good public relations, and it's not with the spirit and intent of our abandoned sign ordinance to not do something to cover over or remove those references to a restaurant that is no longer there. It would be viewed as somewhat deceptive. And so every one of these types of rules, like the abandoned sign code, has an origin, and I tell my staff, I refer to it as the Wyatt cafeteria rule. And there was at one time a popular cafeteria in the Central Mall, and a large tour group going back to Texas got off the interstate at Magnolia, went over to the mall, and unloaded the bus to go to Wyatt Cafeteria. But Wyatt Cafeteria had been closed for 3 months, and the sign was still there, causing them to get off the interstate and go over there to eat. So they all wrote letters to the city commission asking why the city let signs for businesses that didn't exist continue to advertise those businesses. So the response was to adopt this ordinance and says that if you have a sign that doesn't advertise a bona fide business that's there, it shall be deemed abandoned and must be removed at the expense of the owner. So it's our understanding there has been some attempt to paint those over, but they're still visible from the sidewalk and the street, and we will attempt to pursue that with the building owner. It's not just the responsibility of Candiles. And so, again, this is like our first case. It represents an after-the-fact approval of 2 facade modifications that have already been made, and we don't like bringing these cases and apologize for bringing them to the board, but we did reach out to the owner in June and we received no response, and so we didn't honestly know who was working on the building to be able to work with them. And so we've reviewed the exterior painting and we've reviewed the fence. And so in your review of this for compliance with the design guidelines, the green color doesn't appear to be particularly compatible with the color of existing buildings or surrounding buildings. And as to the fence, the board can determine whether they think the material and appearance of the fence as installed is compatible with the material, color, and appearance of nearby buildings. And so and then as far as the sign, we do think it's proportional and appropriately scaled, and it would be compatible with the building if it was modified so that only the text and the unique sign features were illuminated. So we've got 3 different work activities. One is the painting. And so you could approve the work that's been done as you see it in the photographs. If you find that painting and paint color conform to the design guidelines for downtown Salina, you could approve the work that was done on the north facade but deny the approval of the painting of the south facade. You could postpone consideration to explore other alternatives. You could deny the certificate of compatibility for the painting. And so as to the privacy fence, you could approve a certificate of compatibility for the fence just as it's installed, if you find that the wooden fence as installed conforms with the design guidelines. You could require the fence to be flipped so that the attractive side faces outward to the alley and public parking lot. You could require that the fence be replaced by a black wrought iron or powder-coated metal fence if you feel that would be more compatible. Or you could postpone consideration of the fence to a future meeting date to look at other options. Or you could deny the fence as installed and provide some direction to the applicant and staff. And as to the projecting sign, you could approve it as proposed, which we believe is a fully illuminated cabinet. You could approve the installation of the sign, but require that the sign be modified so only the letters and logo are illuminated. You could postpone consideration of the sign to a future meeting date if you think you need additional information, or you could deny a certificate of compatibility for the sign. So as to the painting that's been done, our recommendation is to take whatever action you feel is in the best interests of surrounding building and business owners in the downtown. We have that same recommendation for the fence. Fences aren't that common downtown. Wooden fences are not that common in this kind of situation. It would be helpful if the applicant could tell us what that origin is of that alcove and how they plan to use it. It doesn't look like it's any kind of covered open air dining or anything, but maybe that's a possibility. And then as to the sign, we would recommend approval of the sign with the 5 conditions outlined on page 12 of your report, the 5th of which is that the abandoned awning signs be covered over or removed from the front of the building. And again, we view that as an owner responsibility, not a Candili's responsibility. But we've tried to provide a number of options as to your look at the painting, a number of options as to how the fence is done, and I would just add that the way this is set up and the seating capacity, they need the exit at the rear of the building. And so while they have a gate at the back for security purposes to secure that area, that gate would have to be left open during business hours. And so that the purpose of the gate is because, as we understand it, the purpose of the fence is for security, and the gate adds to that. So with that, we'd be open to any questions that you have. We'll start with the front and with the painting and work our way to the fence and then to the sign. So we'll take questions in that or comments in that order.
So any questions from the board of staff before we invite the applicant up? All right, I'd welcome that. Yeah, and can you please identify yourself as well?
I'm Chris Martinez. I'm the general manager of the business. The reason of the paint is just because of our logo has a little green. That was the only reason, and we didn't know that we need to do an application through the city, and we apologize to them for that. The back, the fence in the back, we put it there because we were having problems with the homeless people back there. They tried to break into the building a couple times, and we even have like a report for the police. That was the reason. And we're planning to do like a little patio back there to repaint the inside of the patio, make it usable for maybe 4 or 5 tables. Not right now, for next year, for next season. And about the awnings, we're planning to replace them. Not right now. That's why we paint the logos with black paint, but we're planning to replace them with our logos. But they're kind of expensive, and we're planning to do it like in 6 months.
Okay. In regards to the sign, was it illuminated?
Yes.
Okay. Entirely illuminated. Our guidelines discourage the white illumination, so I think we've put like a black matting. Is that correct?
Like a black acrylic?
Inside.
I think Dustin can explain it the best, but.
So one of the options that many sign contractors will use when installing signs in the downtown area is they'll use multiple layers of material with what they call a push-through acrylic. So you'll have a plastic-like material that allows light to go through, but then you would also have layers that are solid and opaque that would completely block out light. And so you could have a sign that's similar to the proposed Candeli's sign, where it's primarily white with red, green, and black in their flame logo. However, the white wouldn't show up at night when it's lit up. It would be, you could design it so that, I'll pull up the sign and we can talk about it specifically.
I work with the company that is going to install the sign, and I'll let them know that, okay?
Yeah, so you can make it so that these letters are routed out, and so the red shines through, and like the green shines through, and the rest doesn't, or something like that. I mean, there's options to selectively show what would be illuminated at night, and the background would not be illuminated at night.
Correct. I got you.
And
I understand.
and how was that mounted? Was it going to be hung between the two
In
awnings?
between both of the buildings, there's like two breakers, and there's a third one on the top, and it's gonna be like a cable holding it. They're
Okay.
gonna use both breakers and then like a cable as a third option.
There's a spot there between where the awnings are, where,
Right there.
yeah. So, yeah, right where Dustin is showing there, there's a place there for a sign to be hung. Right, but it's the spot where the sign's going. What we're saying, that bracket may have to be raised, but there's a place for the sign to go right there.
You said
to
that you
be hung.
wanted the sign to be like 10 feet, right? Something
The
like
bottom
that.
of the sign has to be 10 feet above the sidewalk. So we will look at that bracket, but we can work with the sign contractor on that. I would add that the idea about the way the fence is set up, if I had, I was going to have some seats there in that patio, I would want the good side of the fence facing my seating area, so that, I think that helps answer one of staff's questions, because if you're going to have public there, then that would make sense to do that, to have the attractive side there where people might be going. But a lot of people do that on their residential fences. They have the good side facing into their yard and the not so good side facing on their neighbor's yard. So
In this case, with the limited distance and not being a really far or long fence, that you could even double side it so both sides are nice. That would be an option.
Probably help keep people out too from scaling that fence
Yeah,
as well. So
And we got like a little chain holding the door, like he said. And we have a sign saying that door unlocked during business hours for the customers. Like the gate is gonna be open from 11 to 10 when we're operating. They requested and we have it done too.
yeah. So they can, when they're closed and they want to keep people out of there, the gate can be there and secure. But then when we have the public in the restaurant, that'll have to be left open, and they'll just have to supervise it.
any other questions from the board for the applicant? Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to item number 4, comments from interested citizens. Leslie, did you have anything?
I was just going to say that I'm really glad there's a fence back there, that prior to the restaurant opening, it was a hot spot for graffiti. And as Mr. Martinez said, the homeless were, or the unhoused were spending a lot of time there. So on our respect, I'm really happy there's a fence there. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll bring this back to the board.
So again, the painting is done, and it's a judgment call for you. The fence is installed, so that's just a judgment call for you to make a decision that you think reflects the best interests of the downtown overall and surrounding businesses. And then as to the sign, we think the sign can work, but would just have a condition that it be modified so that only the text and the unique sign features are illuminated.
Marcy, do we want to break this up? Yeah. Okay.
I might be helpful if you voted on the painting first, then voted on the fence, and then voted on the sign.
All right, we will address the paint or the facade first. So is there a motion? How you would like to handle that?
I move for denial of certificate of compatibility for the work upon the fact of our previous one of all in good intentions of it, but with the process that we must follow and the precedents that we set that similar to the applicant in the beginning of the time, if we allow business owners to have good intent in paint and then come to us, it makes it challenging for us to follow other policies and procedures.
I just wanted to clarify one thing related to that, and it's why we had the options written the way it was. And I think, Dustin, you have the photo of that, but the design guidelines as it relates to the item 3.1 was the painting of previously unpainted surfaces. So we wanted to point out, and what we were trying to distinguish is that the north building was already painted at the facade. It has a stucco surface and it was painted, and they repainted it green. So it's really a question from the standpoint for that part is, are you supportive of the color? The reason that we broke the south portion out separately is it had never been painted. And so I think the way that we had it is that you could approve all the painting work that had been done. You could approve it on the north facade, but deny approval of the painting of the south facade if that was your choice or direction. But on the question of the north piece, it's not a question of the painting. It's just a question of the compatibility of the color.
Okay.
So you could decide that the green just doesn't fit anywhere. But if that were the case, then you would want to cite that as your reason. And I don't mean to split hairs, but it's just the fact that the north part was historically been stucco that's been painted, and so the design guidelines don't discourage the painting of something that's already painted, but it's just a matter of whether you think the color is compatible with the building and its surroundings.
Okay.
Should we let that motion
Let it
die?
Yep.
So I'll entertain a second of an existing motion.
So that we would entertain a new motion for the exterior painting and see what we can do to assist with that. So again, on bottom page 10, as I've laid out 4 options for the exterior painting. You could approve the exterior painting and paint color as done. You could approve the work that was done on the north facade, but deny approval of the painting of the south facade because it had never been, it's masonry that's never been painted. You could postpone the question of painting to look at other alternatives, or you could deny a certificate of compatibility for all the work, but that would need to be based on the fact for the whole facade that you don't think the color is appropriate.
Yeah, I guess my question for it is with the green, do we have a palette as a community that they must follow? Because
No.
right, the green with the accent on their sign, that green and another, it's not like they're trying to get purple and there's no purple within their sign color, but there is a green aspect of it. It's just not as prominent. So I just want to make sure that we're not
I
allowing.
think that's one of the reasons we have the sign, and we brought the sign so
Okay.
you can
Thank
see
you.
how that is part of their business
Perfect.
theme and how they tried to do that. So if you want to tie the painting and the sign, we do not have a palette.
Okay.
I'm trying to loop back here, but it's just the color just comes back. On signs and everything else is use colors that are compatible with the building front, and compatibility is a judgment call for you as board members.
Okay. I guess to me the color doesn't, I don't know if the discussion with their board, to me the green doesn't bother me, but because it's their brand aspect of it versus the old brand, but. So I would move to approve the work that has been done on the north facade with the color of the exterior aligning with their brand, but denying due to the fact of our precedence in the past votes is to denying the approval of the painting on the south facade, and directed that exterior be removed accordingly.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, I will vote opposed. I can understand the green on the sign, but it did not flow with the building, but I am overruled. So that's why we have multiple votes. So the facade has been
So
moved
we've
on.
addressed the color of the facade now. As to the fence, again, the options were to approve it as it's been installed, require that it be flipped. Mr. Hers provided you another option, which would be to provide a different or an additional layer that faced outward that was attractive. But again, knowing now that it wasn't storage but a dining area on the inside, there might be justification for having the attractive side face inward. You could say you don't like the solid wood at all, and you'd rather see something that was wrought iron or powder coated to match the gate. Or you could postpone consideration of the fence to look at other options, or deny a certificate of compatibility for the fence as installed and provide direction. So we've tried to offer the full gamut there. Again, the fence is there for security, and the applicants have answered our question that the alcove area at some point in time may be set up to have open air tables. And so they will probably dress that area up more than it is today. So again, for the fence, those are the options we've identified.
All right, I will entertain a motion in regards to the fence.
I'd like to go with option 2. Require the fence to be flipped or double-sided
Okay.
for the attractive side to be outward to the alley and public parking lot.
Okay, it is moved.
Second. Yeah, I agree with that.
Moved and seconded for option 2, require the fence be flipped so the attractive side faces outward, or go double-sided. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes 3-0. And the last item is in regards to the proposed sign. Do you feel we can get there tonight, Dean, or do we need to?
I think if you tell us you like option 2, that to approve the installation of the sign, but require that it be modified so only the letters and logo are illuminated, which is option 2, we would just work with the applicant and their sign contractor to make that so.
So moved.
And the elevations and where it's located, staff will handle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, we know, we've seen the sign, we've been there in person, the sign's sitting on the floor in the building ready to go, so we know what it looks like.
Okay. So.
And it does meet the size requirement of the size guidelines.
Not any difficulties. It's 4x4.
Yep.
Just
I've able to measure it myself because it's already there for us to look at. So.
Perfect.
All right, I'll entertain a motion on the sign.
I move to approve the installation of the sign at the location, but require that it be modified so that only the letters and logo in the sign be illuminated.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
And that would include the conditions that we had outlined for the sign, which includes the modification, but we'll work with them on the awnings, and obviously they'll have to work with a licensed sign contractor installer to get the sign put up. So
Correct. Yeah, staff recommendations.
Okay. That consistent with the motion in the second?
I believe so.
Okay, all right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 3-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Moving on to administrative items.
Administrative items, we have none for this evening, or preliminary discussion items for unfinished or other business. We would just share that staff has offered our condolences to your fellow board member, Mr. Nelson. His wife, Teresa, passed away last week, and his wife had a long battle with cancer, and so she passed last week, and that's why he's not with us this evening, and he is still a member of the board. I would note and thank Mr. Romey and Mr. Doak that for both of them, this is their last meeting for their current term on the Design Review Board, and the City Commission has appointed 3 new members, and they will be seated the first meeting in September. And so what we'll do is we'll have our orientation and training and election of officers at that meeting, and so we'll be breaking in 3 new people. So we'll have Mr. Nelson is still on the board, Mr. Manley, and 3 new members, but I wanted to thank Mr. Romey and thank Mr. Doak for their service, and just so everybody knows that this is the last meeting, and Mr. Doak has moved out of county, so he's not eligible to serve in any of our city boards. So just thank you for your time, and wanted everybody to know this was their last opportunity to serve. But we'll roll over into September. We are working on getting a application put together, but there is a plan for putting a Medes restaurant at the old Safelite Auto Glass building. They have a number of facade changes and a patio they're adding, and so we're going to try to work to get that done. Application for the September meeting, and then there's a new sign proposal at the Salvation Army store on 5th Street, and so we will have business on your first meeting in September, but also have orientation, training, and election of officers. So we'll give you Labor Day weekend off.
All right. We don't have public forum. No public is no longer here, so I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Yeah, I'm going to let you the last time. So, all right, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.